Now, with us this morning to talk about the president's actions on Friday and managing all of these crises are Philip Wegman from the Washington Examiner and Richard Levick here of Levick, a crisis management expert. Gentlemen, we appreciate you both being here today.
So I think we should start with the response to the hurricane. Today, responses to natural disasters are no longer just about disasters. Tom, you were talking about it this morning, the response to Hurricane Katrina. It's not just the immediate reaction, it's the timing of the reaction. The reactions are always tied up in some political response as well. What can the president do from this point forward? A lot argue that so far, so good in terms of the president's reaction. How can he continue a positive momentum, if you will, responding to Harvey?
Well, your first question is how can he continue the positive momentum? And that is don't get distracted as he did at 8 p.m. on Friday night with the transgender issue, with the issue on the pardon, which I'm sure we'll get to in a moment. But I think most of his reactions are largely good. But if he's looking for a model to follow, it's fellow Republican Governor Abbott of Texas, who has, I think, been extraordinary, both in the planning and the response. You just had his messages on, which are so clear and unified, critical word here, unified, where the president seems still to be focusing on how can I disrupt the country.
Philip, you look at the images that we saw, this photo from Camp David, the president up there this weekend, not at one of his golf courses. Are we seeing the impact now of General John Kelly as the chief of staff, that this does appear to be the kind of response from a White House that one would expect to see from a White House?
There's definitely some foresight and planning here that I don't think that we've seen earlier on in the presidency. While this storm isn't comparable to Katrina just yet, I think what's telling is that the administration is definitely trying to avoid the mistakes that were made by the Bush administration in the past. These natural disasters can alter the courses of presidencies. And so far, it seems like Trump has been on the ball with his coordination with Abbott and with his declaring a natural disaster down there. So right now, it's been so far so good for him.
It seems like it's helpful, though, because everyone else involved is very strong in the response, like you said, the governor of Texas. I think if someone makes a mistake, though, we may start to see a divide or a crumbling, if you will, of this very strong facade.
You know, I think that's unlikely because of the intensity of the storm. As tragic as it is, we're so far have only identified 2 deaths. We have about 300,000 people without electricity. But we have not yet seen the kind of impacts such as gas prices or inaccessibility to oil, or food, certainly. Those kinds of things that happened with Katrina had a huge impact not only locally but on the country. So to the extent that this is going to be a survivable disaster, I think the administration gets very lucky and, as Phil points out, was better prepared.
Let's talk about this news dump that happened on Friday night, because a lot of people are going to go back to their desks Monday morning, and maybe they have not been as tuned in since Friday afternoon with the news. A ton of stuff happened just on Friday night. Sebastian Gorka out, this transgender ban, Joe Arpaio's pardon. How much of this is pre-planned by this White House to make sure that this stuff, controversial as it is, gets going after 5 o'clock on a Friday that maybe not everybody's paying attention to?
Well, we've definitely seen this play before. The administration has made a habit of the 5:30 news dump. And Democrats, Minority Leader Chuck Schumer in particular, were quick to jump on the president for his pardon of Arpaio, saying that he was using the storm as cover. But what I think is interesting and is actually going to be a turning point in this presidency is, remember, Trump promised that he was the law and order guy. By pardoning Arpaio, he's embracing a sort of lawlessness that we haven't seen so far.
So you mentioned Democrats' reaction to the pardoning of Arpaio, which is completely expected. I mean, there's just nothing surprising about that. But you could argue there is a little surprise to see the divide in the response from Republicans. I mean, pardons are controversial. I don't think you saw this kind of negative backlash from the Democrats when President Obama pardoned Chelsea Manning. Why are Republicans deciding to make this a point of divide and contention within the party when they've got so many problems they need to address?
Well, first of all, from a historical perspective, this is a cleavage of the Republican Party, the likes of which we have not seen since 1856, and we know how that ended with the Civil War. So it's a remarkable repeating of history in so many ways. But here, I think you have some extraordinary differences between, say, the Cap Weinberger pardon by George H.W. Bush or in his administration, or Clinton with Mark Fisher. One, most presidents do it at the end of their presidency. But two, critically, they do it after the judicial process has completed. Here, we haven't even gotten to sentencing. And three, and I think this is a critical point for your viewers, this is not a statutory violation. That is, this is not a violation that the sheriff is accused of in violation of the law. This is a constitutional violation. For the president to step in and to stop the process and say, I don't care that it's a constitutional violation, I think makes all of us who've actually read the Constitution deeply concerned.
Phil, before we leave, we want to talk about Sebastian Gorka out at the White House, though. He now goes back to Breitbart. We know Steve Bannon is back at Breitbart. Is there an alt-right shop now setting up over at Breitbart again, rejuvenized with a chip on its shoulder about how things have gone down to the White House? And is that trouble on the Hill for this White House?
Well, we were talking about a divide in the Republican Party a moment ago, and I think we're going to see that with the current administration finding a lot of its former friends really upset with them. Gorka leaving the West Wing is the changing of a guard, really. There's no longer Breitbart folks over there. And the White House has got to be hoping right now that they can save some face with their base as a result of that Arpaio pardoning, because both of these guys were both massively popular among their supporters.
All right.
Well,
Philip Wegman, Richard Levick, we appreciate both of you coming and joining us on the Hill this morning.